Before we get started, this video... Alright, time to come clean. This was actually supposed to be part of the theme I had for October. Dead Rising 3 would have kicked off the next batch of videos, so Subscribe Star Bros requested. And October ended up being a jumbled mess of trying to find time, so now Halloween's in November. Late November at that. Point is, you're getting horror videos for winter again. I get the feeling that some of you guys would be cool with horror videos all year round. But these won't just be any horror videos, but diving into the most famous zombie films out there. That's right, it's finally time to dive into the king of the genre and his impact on media. Good old George Romero. Remember, aim for the head.
This is the latest disclosure in a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Don't sing if you want to live long. They have no use for your song. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and out of this world. You'll never get a second chance. Plan all your moves in advance. Stay dead, stay dead, stay dead, stay dead and out of this world.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Now your hope and compassion is gone. You've sold out your dream to the world. Stay dead, stay dead, stay dead. You're dead and out of this world.
Night of the Living Dead. This movie needs zero introduction. Like, any. At all. This isn't just one of the most famous zombie movies ever made, but outright one of the most famous films. Regularly cited as the direct source of the zombie genre, a granddaddy to horror's massive tidal wave that crashed across the world. Still inspiring movies to this day, along with video games, comics, novels, plays even. Yeah, zombies are one of the faces to horror. Which is funny considering how relatively new they are to culture. I mean, yeah, there's been stories of the undead stretching far into the centuries, but they always lean into the idea of murderous spirits possessing corpses, or something brought to life by a necromancer or a voodoo curse. The idea of a mindless horde of ravenous corpses that get up and just start killing everything in sight? That's new, but has cemented itself in the public consciousness to the point that it's never going away. 100 years from now, there's still going to be zombie media. Much like the creature itself, it simply won't die. Now why is that? On paper, every zombie story should just be the same thing over and over again. Hapless survivors faced with feral flesh eaters. Well, that's because of just how much you can do with the concept. Games like Resident Evil, Dead Rising, Project Zomboid, Left 4 Dead, Dying Light, Dead Island, all of these have radically different takes on the zombie concept, doing their own things and keeping the idea fresh. And this is just with video games. The sheer impact that zombies have had on movies cannot even begin to be described. It's like trying to explain the impact paper had on civilization. There's simply two types of people out there. Those born before Night of the Living Dead and those after. It sounds like I'm overhyping things, but I'm really not. The sheer deluge of zombie media since the 60s would have you believe this has just always been a staple, but far from it actually. Why is that? What about these creatures grab the public by the balls and refuse to let go? Werewolves and vampires have lasted far longer, yet they don't seem to be anywhere near as popular as zombies. Ghosts are universally creepy, except in Japan where they actually seem pretty cute. Kayako, you scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, but now I actually think you're kinda hot. But anyway, these also seem to be buried compared to The Walking Dead. Hell, just that term, Walking Dead. The title not just as a nomenclature for zombies, but one of the biggest franchises in the world. Now, there's a lot of different factors you could point to. And I'd be lying if I said nobody's burned out by the sheer amount of zombie media that dominated the landscape. But I think what keeps the genre alive is that, at their core, zombie stories are usually about people. How we react in a crisis, trying to outsmart an overwhelming foe, and what your fellow man is capable of when society breaks down. Zombie stories can be deeply misanthropic, showing nasty and terrible people taking advantage of the chaos, or they can actually explore the perks of mankind, our ingenuity or ability to use our heads to smash in the skulls of this grisly enemy, uniting against a common foe. Zombie media has all kinds of flavors to it, and it's getting more varied as time goes on. And audiences keep flocking to see these different interpretations and views on what the creators view as the end of the world. As much as we say culture's burnt out on zombies, they still rake in a shitload of money. Granted, yeah, there's plenty out there that's just trying to be fun or fucked up, but that adds to the flavor. having the drunk fun mixed in with the legitimate masterpieces that make you see this isn't just fuel for splatter junkies. Instead, it's a tool to be used, however the creators see fit. But that raises the question, why did all this start from some dirt cheap indie movie shot in the outskirts of Pittsburgh? Well, let's talk about it a bit. Night of the Living Dead released in 1968, directed by George Romero. At the time, George was in college at Carnegie Mellon and was keeping himself afloat doing small directorial stuff. Under the company he founded with his friend Russell Strainer, called The Latent Image. It was small time. A commercial every now and then, an industrial film, which is basically work safety videos. And the whole time George wanted to break out, to take that big risk that would shoot him up into the industry. Now remember, Latent Image was microscopic. A tiny production company that could just barely scrape together any resources for a film. So they contacted Hardman Associates, a firm that specialized in industrial films. They pitched their idea for a horror film, even though at the time they didn't even have a title for it. All they knew is they wanted to make a horror movie. The idea itself wasn't a bad one. This was the mid to late 60s, dipping into the 70s, where horror and disturbing films would explode. And this is off the heels of Psycho in 1960, which popularized disturbing films among the general audience. Sure, at the time, horror films was still considered pretty hokey. This was the age of hammer horror, where Dracula and the Wolfman were what made people shit their pants. Of course, this is a generalization, since you did have legitimately creepy films that are actually well made even after all this time. It wasn't all House on Haunted Hill, but the point is the general public was used to stuff that was disturbing but never crossed any lines too hard. A disturbing implication here and there, but the sheer visceral nature of extreme horror was still a few years out before Grindhouse was a thing. And this risk was rocky. Despite being able to pull some money together, it wasn't much. This was all indie as it could get. Altogether, after George was able to talk multiple investors into the project, one of them was a fucking butcher, they were able to scrounge up $114,000, which in today's money is a bit over $1 million. By the way, that butcher comment, that's not an exaggeration. Like, he was a literal butcher. He provided some of the special effects in the movie when the zombies are going around eating meat. Hell, they had to delay filming multiple times so George could go around and ask investors for cash so they could keep going, showing them footage of stuff they already got done so they could make the money to film a tiny bit more. This was a passion project and a half, which is funny because when they were first making the movie, they actually had no idea what they wanted to do. The project started off as a horror comedy of a group of kid aliens running around causing chaos, which was scrapped because it was dumb and it would have blown the budget higher than what was physically possible. They tried to workshop this into an idea of aliens coming down to Earth to harvest dead bodies for food, but this was also scrapped. Probably because that sounds suspiciously close to Plan 9 from outer space and you don't want to touch that. Instead, they decided to break things down and keep it simple. A bunch of people trapped in a farmhouse during a national emergency. Keep the scale small and the story tight. Taking influence from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, about a plague that wipes out mankind and turns what's left into murderous creatures. Romero was interested in the story as it takes place sometime after the contagion already destroyed the world, so he decided to make a story basically about the first wave. But the production troubles and constant rewrites caused them to break things down even further. The first draft of Night of the Living Dead was described by Matheson himself as essentially stealing the concept of the vampire infection more than homage. So the creatures were shaken up. Instead of people infected by a virus that turned them into vampires, they were now the famous flesh-eating ghouls we know today. Romero basing it off a short story he himself wrote that was later expanded while he was filming, which would eventually become the sequels Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. A lot of Night of the Living Dead's production can only be described as they had no idea what the fuck they were doing. Much of the dialogue was improvised by the cast simply because there was never a consistent script they could stick by. They were scrambling to get things done at every step, and some of the most famous scenes of the film were completely off-the-hook improv. The majority of Ben's dialogue was made up by Dwayne Jones, since he wasn't a fan of his character's lines and decided to rewrite the character himself. Night of the Living Dead, at its heart, is a very quaint indie movie. A bunch of blue-collar guys from Pittsburgh wanted to make a movie, and they did whatever they could to get it done. It's honestly to the point that you could probably make a film about them making the film. With how many different plates they had to balance, all for a guy who just a year prior was filming commercials and shorts for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Yeah, George Romero worked on Mr. Rogers early in his career.
He hired me to shoot the remote stuff. Basically, it was little films that they would show. I did Mr. Rogers Gets a Tonsillectomy. To this day, the scariest film I ever made. And he was the first guy that really sort of let me, have final cut and trusted me enough to do that. He was the sweetest man in the world.
Romero himself took multiple weird influences for Night of the Living Dead. He was a massive fan of Golden Age horror comics, stuff like EC Comics, Creepshow, Tales from the Dark Side, you get the point. Hell, he would later direct an adaptation of Creepshow in 1982, which is one of his more famous movies. And it makes sense in why Night stands out among a lot of horror films from that era. Usually a horror film up to the 60s would follow a pretty general path of being a morality tale. The evil is punished and the good saved. Usually if there's a bad ending in a horror movie, it's because you were following someone who deserved to get screwed over. Even Psycho had Norman be arrested at the end. But the indie scene of horror was all around far more nihilistic. The good could absolutely be screwed over, and the evil can be this overwhelming force that can't be stopped. The comics Romero loved had this quite a bit, telling disturbing and even darkly funny stories that played on the expectations of the readers. Something that plays into Night of the Living Dead as well. There's a lot of dark and ironic humor in Night, something that might actually fly over most people's heads who go in expecting a gory zombie film. For one, there's not a lot of zombies in the movie. This detail is absolutely because of budget. They couldn't scrape enough money together to flood the farmhouse with the undead, so they saved showing them as much as possible. But there's details such as how certain characters die, the way the story progresses, even how the military and authorities portrayed in the film. All of which have these dark twists that are so ingrained in zombie films, most people probably don't understand how different it really was for a film to have this coming out in 1968. All around, Night of the Living Dead's a very misanthropic movie. It shows people at their worst, and the big joke of the movie is how letting petty squabbles get in the way can prevent you from solving problems that are pretty simple. Characters act remarkably dumb in this movie, but what makes it frustrating is that it's completely believable why they do what they do. It's not that characters act dumb because the script's bad, they act dumb because the story's about how people who have no idea what to do are thrown into this survival situation. Each of the Dead films can be broken down in a single word. Night of the Living Dead, panic. Dawn of the Dead, coordination. Day of the Dead, despair. All three have a central idea they talk about and explore, showing each character embody these words and the reactions humanity has to the zombie Armageddon. Now notice the word for night, panic. The story is about the panic that people will face when the dead first begin to rise. Nobody's thinking, nobody's calming down, tensions are high, and anything can happen. Panic is infectious, and the entire story is about how it breaks the group down and causes their downfall. But before going any further, I'm going to put up a spoiler warning. It's weird to do this for a film that's 57 years old now, but I want to cover my bases in case anybody hasn't seen it yet. This movie is all over the place. You can watch it on fucking YouTube. So sit down and give it a watch before going any further. So Night of the Living Dead is a pretty simple story. There's only two locations, the graveyard and the farmhouse. When I said this movie was indie, that is not a joke. Half the cast were not even actors. They were people who simply knew Romero and wanted to be in the movie. Johnny is played by Russell Streiner. Cooper is played by Carl Hardman, the president of Hardman Associates. Helen was played by his vice president, a woman named Marilyn Eastman. Karen was Hardman's real-life daughter, and she also plays the mutilated corpse in the farmhouse. Judy was played by one of Hardman's receptionists, and she never acted a day before in her life. Sheriff McKelland was played by George Casana, who was the production manager. That's a good chunk of the cast that aren't even played by actors. Some of these were major characters. The only characters played by people with acting experience were Ben, Barbara, Tom, the cemetery zombie, even then, not really, and Bill Cardile. All these people were professional actors and had some experience on set. Dwayne Jones, who played Ben, was in stage plays, and this was his first actual movie role, training in New York City during his time in college as an English major. Barbara was played by Judith O'Dea, who had experience as a stage actress, and actually met Romero due to her working for Hardman's industrial films. At the time, she was looking for a big break in Hollywood and basically took on the role as a way to get some pocket money. Tom was played by Keith Wayne, who had a variety of jobs, a singer, a dancer, he later became a chiropractor. This dude wore a lot of hats. He also killed himself in 1995. Cemetery Zombie was played by Bill Hinsman, who sort of made a career playing zombies in different horror films. I guess he wasn't scared of being typecasted. Still, he was always just kind of a background guy. Billy Cardile wasn't so much an actor as he was a host of different TV programs in Pittsburgh, some local wrestling, a few game shows, a horror anthology show. He actually plays himself in the movie, as Romero was a fan of his and even cast his daughter as Sarah in Day of the Dead, which that's actually kind of dope. Still, you get the idea. The actual amount of actors in this movie is pretty small. It was mostly people around town and friends of Romero. Hell, this might seem like a weird comparison, but Night of the Living Dead was basically the 60s version of almost like the Blair Witch Project or even Clerks, a very small-scale indie movie that explodes, despite being made as simply as possible. Hell, much like Clerks, the film is shot in black and white. You might think this is because the film is older, but color was already very common in films by this point. You had color films for around 20 years. Stuff like Rear Window, Vertigo, The Dollars Trilogy, Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz. Like, you get the point. The film is shot in black and white simply because it was cheaper. You don't have to worry about the lighting as much or color correction, and don't have to worry about color at all. All the blood is chocolate syrup, for God's sakes. They pinched any penny they could. But this ended up helping the movie, as the deep contrast to white and black helped it feel much more oppressive. The farmhouse is basically your sole source of light when it gets dark, and all over the place outside are these hordes of flesh-eating zombies hiding in the black. Despite not seeing that many zombies, you feel they're out there, shambling closer. It plays with your head, tapping into that classic fear of the dark everyone has to some degree. It's not about the dark, it's about what's hiding inside of it. Night of the Living Dead excels at making you feel like you're at the cusp of this nightmarish situation that just keeps getting worse. Despite the group being able to watch TV and get updates, news stories, even showing cops and army guys, full-blown militias tackling the hordes, you never feel like it's getting safer, which is a part of the twist I mentioned earlier. Instead of the military having all the answers and swooping in to save the day, they seem completely baffled at the situation like anyone else. They're scrambling around trying to contain this problem, but they seem like they're a million miles away for our main characters. Night of the Living Dead is great at showing social normality breaking down. People go from rational and kind-hearted townsfolk to bitter, paranoid, and ruthless animals. And the worst part of the situation is that everyone is right. So onto the actual story of Night of the Living Dead. Everyone knows the intro. Barbara and her brother Johnny go to the graveyard to put flowers on their father's grave. While there, Johnny's attacked by a strange man, and Barbara's forced to flee to a nearby farmhouse. There, she runs into Ben, a man who's been on the run since the start of whatever's going on, and he decides to stay and bore up the farmhouse with Barbara. While there, they try to rationalize what they've seen. All Barbara saw was the man at the graveyard and a handful of other zombies at the farmhouse, seeing small signs of carnage hiding in plain sight around her, like how the owners of the house are missing, more people like the man at the graveyard are converging on the house, even a mutilated dead body on the second floor. Ben, however, was in town when shit hit the fan, describing how he just drove through a horde of the dead, unable to comprehend the idea of them just standing there staring at him.
I looked back at the diner to see if there was anyone there who could help me. It was when I noticed that the entire place had been encircled. There wasn't a sign of life left except... By now, there were no more screams. I realized that I was alone with 50 or 60 of those things, just standing there, staring at me.
It's a pretty haunting monologue. We never see more than the farmhouse and a few glimpses of the outside world on the TV, and towards the end, Ben's story is enough to sell you that the situation's bad. Whatever's going on has kicked off, and it kicked off hard. It's also revealed there are more survivors who were hiding in the farmhouse. Harry Cooper, his wife Helen, and their daughter Karen, who were hiding in the basement alongside two teenage locals that sought shelter when the emergency broadcast began, Tom and his girlfriend Judy. Right from the get-go, you're probably seeing why Night of the Living Dead holds up even after all these years. Despite being the first of its kind and a low-budget one that is admittedly pretty cheesy in parts, this movie really nails the feel of a zombie movie. A lot of genre kickoff movies can vary drastically from their contemporaries that later try to chase the same high. Black Christmas and Halloween are technically slasher movies, but they couldn't be more different than something like Friday the 13th or the later Halloween sequels. Usually the genres boil down over time and people remember the aspects that weren't really focused on in the watershed titles. But Night of the Living Dead is pretty much a perfect breakdown of what's expected during a zombie movie. The sudden shock of the undead going on a rampage, the building of the group usually made up of random jabronis who just slam together due to complete chance, and the tensions rising as personal conflicts and the growing horde of the dead jack up the pressure. This is such a basic foundation to a zombie movie that I've explained the brass tacks to at least 200 different titles. Hell, this can apply to most of Romero's own later zombie movies. It's a tried and true formula that's familiar enough to follow and open enough for different creators to have their own spin on things. Just gather your group of losers and try to keep them from being bit. And despite being the first zombie film, a lot of the rules it puts in place are still being used. Shoot them in the head? Night of the Living Dead came up with it. Recently dead coming back to life to eat people? Yep, Night came up with it. Infected are mindless corpses that don't think about anything but trying to kill the living? Night's lore. Now, the only real deviations that Night has from later zombie stories are the explanation behind how the infected rose and the fire rule. Night explains the dead rose from a space probe returning to Earth. It circled the planet Venus and was irradiated, and when a crash lands, it contaminates the region, causing the outbreak. This is later contradicted by Dawn and Day, which implies more that it could be biblical Armageddon, but it's pretty subtle about it. But for Night, it sticks to space radiation. Obviously, later films had their own ideas for outbreaks outbreaks, viral plagues, unnamed phenomenon, parasites, chemical spills, biological weapons. Some had their own versions of the radiation idea as well. The reason why has been shaken up and adjusted for God knows how long. Everyone had to have their own spin. Now, the fire rule is an interesting one. Night goes with the idea the zombies don't like fire, moving to avoid it instead of mindlessly pushing through like later renditions. It's interesting, since it implies a level of brain activity that's still able to recognize dangers like fire. Some even use weapons. Blunt objects they mindlessly bash against the walls and windows to get inside. This would later become a through line Romero would expand on with each film, starting off as simple monsters and ending as essentially their own new form of mankind, leaning on that I Am Legend influence like the original draft of the script. But funny enough, the fire rule would be completely forgotten in the later movies, the dead mindlessly pushing through it and showing little self-preservation in that regard. But it makes sense why they would keep that rule that they don't like fire. They clearly didn't have the money for professional stuntmen, and lighting random people on fire for your zombie movie isn't exactly ethical, so they have the actors playing zombies move out of the way and avoid the fire so they don't get burned. You do get a shot or two of a zombie being burned, but they keep that very minimal. Back to the summary, you get a basic idea of what the central conflict is between the survivors. Cooper wants everyone to hide in the basement, while Ben wants to fortify the house itself. Both options actually make sense. Cooper's right, the basement means they could make as little noise as possible and the dead would move on once they forget about them. But Ben is also right in that the dead are gathering outside right now. They don't know how long the crisis will last, and they could potentially be trapped down there for a long time. They don't even have extra food provisions or water, and Cooper's daughter's injured, being bitten by one of the ghouls when they fled from town. Remember that. Staying down in the basement instead of trying to find help or at least secure a foothold sounds like suicide. It's an equal argument that lets you see both sides of it. Cooper's an asshole, but he's not unreasonable. Instead of being a mustache-twirling villain, he's just a scared father trying to keep his wife and injured daughter safe. Ben is a good, take-charge kind of guy, but he's demanding a lot out of these complete strangers that have no idea what they're doing. Ben's already killed multiple of the dead. Meanwhile, I'd be shocked if Cooper, Barbara, or even Tom ever touched a gun before any of this. He's the one that adjusts the best to the situation. Everyone else falls into panic and infighting that causes mistake after mistake. Tom is too focused on his girlfriend Judy, losing sight of the bigger mission. Cooper is too focused on his wife and daughter, refusing to lift a finger for the rest of the group until the last possible second. Even then, it's begrudging and kinda half-assed. Barbara is a complete catatonic, traumatized and useless as she's too stuck inside of her own head to even acknowledge what's going on. The only one thinking straight is Ben, and unfortunately his plan relies on trusting these other people who don't have their head in the game. This is why I said that while the characters are dumb, they make total sense as to why they're dumb. They're panicked, tired people, encountering a situation they've never seen before. The time frame itself also plays a factor for their behavior. This was rural Pennsylvania in the 1960s. Small town life was very community-oriented and small scale. Everyone knew each other. Now these total strangers are forced to work together and suddenly everyone's acting crazy and people are turning on each other, either to eat them alive or kill them for whatever reason. It's not like the modern era where there's a strong distrust among strangers even in smaller towns. That grit and cynicism wasn't normal yet. These were people who were used to running to the local church for help, a sort of golly gee whiz mentality, encountering this nightmare that doesn't care. Now you can probably guess what's going on with Cooper's daughter. She was bitten, and yes, that rule applies. Night of the Living Dead really sells the idea this situation is new. No one knows how to react, and everything everyone is used to running to for help is just gone, or far enough away that would be suicide to try to get to. Suddenly filling up a car with gas is this multi-step process that can be downright fatal, something that just a day prior was almost a mindless act. Oh, truck's running low? Better get gas. Well, try getting gas while a horde of flesh-eating zombies try to grab at you. Not so easy anymore. Now, this mission actually gets a part of the group killed. For context, Ben plans on filling up his truck and getting the survivors the hell out of there. If they can get the truck gas, then theoretically they could drive to an army base or a militia running around clearing out zombies or even a rescue center. The point is, way more people and way more guns, and far away from the farmhouse, which is attracting zombies like a beacon. Along the way, Judy demands to follow Tom and Ben, offering to help drive the truck while they fend off the zombies. This isn't a bad idea itself, and at first things are working out fine. They make it to the gas pump and Ben is doing a good job at holding off the horde. Unfortunately, the key to the gas pump doesn't work, so Ben says fuck it and shoots it.
This key won't work. Watch it.
Yeah, this is not exactly a smart idea, but you either die from being eaten or being blown up. Decent enough gamble. Still, the gas starts flowing, and they finally remember they had a burning torch right next to the pump. Yeah, the truck catches fire. To their credit, Tom and Judy almost make it out. Almost.
Come on, come on.
My jacket's caught.
Yeah, her jacket got stuck and the two are blown sky high. It's a case of a stupid death that once again makes sense in context. This is a high-stress situation where tunnel vision kicked in hard. They focused so hard on just getting the truck gas, they forgot the small details, like the torch they placed on the ground so Ben could shoot the pump. And once the truck was on fire, Tom and Judy panicked and drove off instead of simply taking a few seconds to try to put the fire out. It's a completely realistic panic in a situation that justifies it. It's dumb in the sense that such a small mistake could spiral into two people dead and a man stranded out there with their only gun, a total fuck-up. But it makes sense, only possible by having a bunch of random townsfolk who have no idea what they're doing trying to enact a tricky plan. But yeah, Tom and Judy are barbecue. Ben fights like hell to get back to the house, and this is where Cooper goes from a well-meaning dickhead to somebody about to be fed to the horde ass first. He tries to keep Ben out there, holding the door closed when Ben tried to re-enter the house and forcing him to break the door down. What I like about this scene is that you see even on Cooper's face, he couldn't believe he was capable of that. He looks shocked, and actually does go to help Ben once he's back inside. It was that small, evil voice in his head that told him to keep Ben outside. He was just making things worse. Tom and Judy were dead because of his stupid plan. Once again, it's not an over-the-top heel turn, but a realistic depiction of someone who falls into this temptation to fuck over this guy he hates, because him and Ben squabbled repeatedly over control of the group. Despite Cooper insisting he was just going to stay in the basement with his family, he sure liked to poke his head out and try to tell others what to do. Still, the truck plan is in ruins. Now the remaining survivors are stuck wondering what to do. They can't walk, Cooper's daughter is still too weak to move, and the amount of zombies outside are growing in number. The news is talking about militias going around shooting zombies, which, that's cool, but they're a long way out. Hell, wherever they are, it's daytime, and the farmhouse is pitch black outside. It must be a completely different time zone. Yeah, this is actually a production error. You can headcanon it, this footage was the news recorded earlier in the day, but it's meant to be a live broadcast. They just filmed during the day and slapped it here. It's not a big deal, but it is pretty funny. Still, the TV suddenly cuts out. The power is gone, either because a fuse was blown or the power lines went down. Either way, they're screwed. Cooper is fully consumed in his desire to take control of the group, conspiring to steal the gun from Ben. And to make matters worse, the dead are now fully sieging the house, banging on the walls and windows to get inside. This is where things go from bad to total shit show. The meager fortifications the group slapped together are falling apart. There's too many outside. Cooper grabs the gun and demands everyone get into the cellar, causing a fight between him and Ben, which ends in Ben shooting him. Cooper stumbles down into the cellar and dies next to his daughter, and the dead are still relentless in their attack upstairs, tearing down each board and making bits more progress every minute. Barbara finally snaps out of her catatonic state to free Helen from a horde at the window, but she herself is grabbed instead. Helen is killed when she goes down to the basement, seeing her reanimated daughter eating Cooper's body, then shambling over to Helen and murdering her with a trowel. Now this scene is regularly cited as being kind of weird since it's a case where a zombie explicitly murders someone instead of trying to eat them, even using a weapon to use it. Yeah, she stabs her to death. But hey, it's fine, it's a pretty iconic kill. They even show it on the poster. Still, Barbara is pulled into the horde and devoured. One of the zombies grabbing onto her is Johnny, leaving Ben as the last man standing. He finally goes down to the basement and executes Cooper and Helen, who return as zombies, now stuck down in the one place he refused to go the entire movie. This is actually a pretty fun detail in Night of the Living Dead you don't see talked about much. A lot of the deaths are pretty ironic. Johnny dies from the zombie he points out to Barbara at the graveyard, reminding her of an old childhood scary story he would tease her with when they were children, and he later pulls her into the horde where she's devoured. Remember that iconic line?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, that was actually foreshadowing how she would later die. Tom dies from trying to help Judy, his main motivation in the story. Everything he did was to keep her safe, and they die together from a truck explosion because she got stuck. And Judy dies because she was trying to prove how useful she was to Tom. Cooper dies because he refused to trust Ben, constantly fighting with him and later blaming him for Tom and Judy dying. His whole plan was to force everyone down into the cellar, and he dies down there, shot by the man he constantly prodded and provoked. Helen's main motivation was to protect her daughter, and how does she die? Yep, killed by her own child. And of course we gotta talk about Ben. Ben's ultimate plan was to hole up and wait for rescue, or find a vehicle to make it to a rescue center. His entire plan hinged on finding other people that could help. The main reason the farmhouse fell was because he wanted to trust other people, but just shouldn't have. Well, Ben dies for being shot by the militia. Yep, when they're scanning the countryside and clearing out the dead, Ben finally pokes his head out of the basement, going to the window to see if they were human. Well, they thought he was a zombie, and he's shot in the head, thrown on a burn pile and written off. All the deaths are ironic and everyone dies. There's not one survivor. All central characters are axed off and left as just a tragic story from the outbreak, which is honestly kind of fitting. The original idea of the story was to show an example of one of the potential situations the outbreak from I Am Legend could have had, so the expectation was that nobody would walk out of it alive, since Neville was the only survivor in the book. And the dark irony applies to the militia as well. Not just that they shoot Ben, but the fact you have this subversion. Usually in horror films around this time, the army or police were the stalwart defenders that came in to save the day. They were the authority that characters could turn to in order to fix things, but now, they were basically the final nail in the coffin. They're played off as reckless and just sort of shooting things on sight. Hell, you can see Ben pointing a gun at them, but they don't seem to register it, just assuming he's a zombie and capping him, which has this creepy question linger. Have they been doing this, just shooting anyone they think is a zombie? It's not like it's hard to tell which is which. One's a walking corpse, and another could possibly just be a scared person. Just shout out, you'll immediately know. But the point is to show how slapdash this all is. Military and militia barely have the situation contained, claiming stability when all we know is they're shooting anything that looks like a zombie. Not a terrible idea, but is the larger problem of the radiation animating the dead solved? Well, later sequels would show that no, it has not. Still, that's Night of the Living Dead. What is there to say? This is a classic. Yeah, you can definitely see some crow's feet in more than a few places, but for the first actual zombie movie, it's genuinely amazing how well it holds up. Not only still being a defining title in the genre, but one of the best examples of it. The characters are believable and genuinely interesting. The plot, while slow in the middle, is still engaging to watch play out. And the genuine creepiness in the movie is impossible to ignore. It nails the atmosphere and keeps you unnerved, even having some disturbing moments that are still freaky to this day. It's mandatory watching for anyone interested in not just horror, but film as well. And I'm not joking, they will make you watch this in film school, for multiple reasons. Not just because it's one of the most iconic movies ever made, but also as a warning about making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. Yeah, there's a funny detail I should mention about Night of the Living Dead. This movie's public domain. I might be thinking, that makes sense, this movie's super old, but it's not because the copyright ran out. It takes like 100 years for that to happen. No, it's public domain because George Romero and his team fucked up their paperwork. They registered the copyright for the wrong name. You see, one of the working titles for Night of the Living Dead was Night of the Flesh Eaters. They changed it because it was too similar to another movie that came out in 1964 just called The Flesh Eaters, which is actually cited as one of the first gore movies. Still, when they went to register the copyright, they copyrighted Night of the Flesh Eaters, the working title, not Night of the Living Dead. So the movie was immediately shoved into public domain, meaning anyone can do whatever they want with this movie without paying for the rights. Want to sample it for music? You can do it. Want to make a distribution company? You can buy up copies of the movie and print it under your own label. Now I should clarify, this is all under US public domain law. I'm not sure about any other region. They did actually get their paperwork done in other places, so that's something I don't know too much about. But if you're in the US and you want to include this in your student film, like as your final or something, you can, and it has been done. A lot.
We could talk about movies. I see you're watching Night of the Living Dead.
Now, if you play the game Ludo, which is some indie horror game, you can actually just sit down and watch Night of the Living Dead in the game. They just have the movie on a TV you can watch, because it's public domain. It's completely free to include. I wasn't kidding when I said you can watch this movie on YouTube. It's totally free. And there's been multiple channels that either did a commentary track or outright streamed it. Hell, I streamed it. The only risk is if some dickhead copyright claims it saying they own the rights, which they don't, because the movie is public domain. Now, of course, Romero and Striner were not happy about this. In fact, they were pretty pissed. The movie they poured their blood, sweat, and tears into immediately went into public domain because of a clerical error, meaning the amount of money they could actually take home due to royalties was minimal at best. Still, it ended up being a weird blessing in disguise. The impact of the movie skyrocketed the two into the industry, and the subsequent films cemented Romero as the king of the dead. It's a funny story about what happens if you aren't careful about your paperwork. You can be the greatest director in the world, but a single form not filled out right can make it all come crashing down. Watch yourselves, guys. Now, we could end things here, but not just yet. You see, Night of the Living Dead is a massively beloved horror film, a cult hit that kicked off a whole new genre of horror, so you know what that means. Remake time. Yeah, Night wasn't immune to the remake fever that plagues horror media. And it being public domain means that there are a lot of remakes of Night of the Living Dead out there. Smaller film companies usually take a crack at it since the name is instantly recognizable and you don't have to pay for the rights to remake it. So long as you don't reference anything from the other of the Dead movies and keep it in the realm of Night, you're pretty much golden. But we're not talking about any of those. Instead, we're talking about the official remake from 1990, directed by Tom Savini. This is a remake that tends to fly under the radar for a lot of people. They acknowledge it happened, but not too many feel like talking about it in detail. A lot of that is basically because it's the exact same story again. You still have Barbara, Ben, the farmhouse, most everybody dies, the whole deal. Well, there's actually some remixes for the 90s one that makes it genuinely interesting to talk about. You see, Tom Savini wasn't just some jabroni that wanted to make his own version of Night. This was the special effects guy for Romero himself, working with him on Dawn and Day of the Dead, alongside a near 20-year-long career in film making stuff for Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, we'll talk about him more when we talk about Dawn of the Dead, but for now, you just need to know this isn't some slouch cheaply using the name for a quick buck. Hell, Romero even acted as executive producer and helped write the script for the remake. The remake has some obvious differences from the get-go. For one, it's in color. This had a far larger budget than the original, which was basically $1 million gathered by hopping from investor to investor, with the promise of roles in the movie or very affectionate handjobs. The remake had $4.2 million to play with, meaning they could go a bit bigger and bolder this go around. The zombies are far more elaborate, their makeup depicting a nastier, gnarlier version of the undead, which was Savini's claim to fame at this point, though obviously nowhere near to the extent of Day of the Dead. He actually wanted to avoid that since he thought the more subtle and understated graphic violence was more respectful to the original movie. You also have a new cast. Instead of a bunch of Randys Romero was friends with, you have some pretty serious talent. Tony Todd as Ben and Bill Moseley as Johnny, just named two examples. Even if Bill Moseley's not in the movie very long. The movie also takes the chance to remix some elements from the original. Remember, the first movie was a slapdash affair, a lot of moving parts and shifting goals that kept it from being the definitive version Romero wanted, so elements had been rewritten and changed around. Another reason they wanted to make a remake to the movie in the first place is because they wanted an official one out there before any yokel got the same idea. Hell, they actually wanted to change more, but studio interference got involved and made them cut down a lot of their ideas, because George Romero had to step away due to a time schedule issue, and Savini was left trying to fight the suits himself. He even outright said it's maybe like a portion of what he originally wanted to do. And the original being public domain means anyone else could have just shot out a trashy movie with the same name and claimed it was a remake. So they wanted this out, and they wanted it out fast and right. Regardless, the remakes did happen, but it was way later, after the 90s one came out. So this is still meant to be the definitive remake. And you get the idea. Savini and Romero wanted to change some stuff around, plump up some aspects they felt the original screwed up, and have their version of Night of the Living Dead out there before anyone else could come and shit all over the pie. The main thing being changed was Barbara herself. In the original, she was a very passive character, going into shock after the death of her brother and remaining that way for pretty much the whole runtime. Ben ends up replacing her as the protagonist, and she's sort of relegated to a background character. The remake gives her much more of an active role. She's still traumatized at first, but she quickly shows she can adjust to this new world, even establishing that she is the only one really thinking after a point, able to take that second to step back and think that the characters in the original never did, and showing how powerful that truly is in this situation. It's widely agreed upon that the remake definitely does Barbara better than the original. Romero all around tightened up the scripts and characters as each movie in the trilogy went on. Night being this pack of yokels that were improvising on the spot, and by day you had legitimately smart and quotable characters that were interesting to see talk.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
So Remake Barbara is essentially him going back and trying to iron out what was considered a pretty weak part of the original. Not that Barbara being a traumatized mess was a mistake, but they didn't give her an arc one way or the other. She just stays as a catatonic woman for so long, you can tell they genuinely forgot to give her things to do. In the remake, she's involved with fortifying the house, fighting zombies, how the whole ending changes because of her character shift. You see, the movie follows 90% of the same plot beats as the original. You still have the graveyard scene, Barbara making it to the farmhouse, running into Ben, it's all there. But there's small shifts and details that give away that the remake is sort of expecting you to have watched the original, since some of the plot details only really hit if you watch the original movie. Like, instead of the rest of the group just stumbling into the house as well, it's established that Tom and Judy ran there because it was actually Tom's uncle's house, clearing up this vague detail from the 60s version, since Cooper just stuck with him due to running into Tom. He didn't have a plan, he just followed with his wife and kid. The conflict is now also a three-pronged affair this go around. Instead of just being the house versus the basement, Barbara herself insists on the idea to just make a run for it. The zombies are slow and clumsy, they could just push through while there was an opening, instead of letting the horde build around them. Once again showing she has a talent for noticing details the others don't, even becoming the one with the highest kill count by the end. The way Tom and Judy die is changed too. During the plan to get gas for the truck, Ben falls out into the horde. While he's fighting them off, Tom and Judy try to get the keys to the pump, but none of them work, and Tom shoots it. Yep, and he got tails this go around for the coin toss, immediately igniting the gas and the two exploding once again. Definitely an acknowledgement that Ben shooting the pump in the original movie was a dumb fucking move. Ben himself has changed too. He's still rational and a capable leader, but he's also more openly hateful to Cooper. Their dynamic is unstable and the two are shouting and fighting each other way more often. Cooper in general is basically an over-the-top caricature of who he was before. Instead of just being a scared father who doesn't know what he's doing, he's leagues more sleazy, feeling more like a con artist than a guy with a wife and kid. He's still not wrong with his idea to go down to the basement, but he's not convincing anybody to lend him $1, let alone trusting him with their lives. Hell, when he screws Ben over, it's way more transparent than the original, actively refusing to let him inside and trying to steal Barbara's gun. He's definitely the villain of the movie, which to me feels like an overcorrection considering he wasn't even a villain in the original, just a scared father who didn't know what to do. He just cracked under the pressure. It also changed how the ending plays out. After everything goes to shit and Cooper fucks the group over, they still keep his wife being killed by their daughter. This time much more of a traditional zombie death where she bites into Helen's neck. Well, as all this is happening, the guns are already drawn. Ben and Cooper are shooting at each other. Karen shambles her way upstairs and they argue over whether or not to put her down. Barbara, the one Karen is actively targeting, just says, "Fuck it," and puts a bullet in her head, causing Cooper to lash out. Ben manages to shoot him and they wound each other, though Barbara is forced to flee from the house, easily evading the dead and even noticing that they're actually blind. The zombies were attracted by noise the whole time, the noise they constantly made with their arguing and trying to fortify the house. If they just shut up and sat in the basement or the attic, they could have stayed hidden, but they ironically drew more to them. Barbara actually stumbles into the militia who are clearing out zombies, who take her in and even agree to go back to the house, hoping to save Ben. Ben, who once again goes down to the basement as zombies flood the house, bleeding out as he finds the gas pump keys, hanging on a hook in the basement the entire time. He laughs out of sheer despair and dies. Yep, when Barbara comes back, Ben is already turned. The militia puts him down and it's revealed Cooper's alive too. Not as a zombie, he's fully alive, even thinking Barbara came back to save him. Yeah, she just shoots him in the head and calls it a day. The film ends with the militia loading the bodies onto the burn pile, Barbara now the lone survivor of the group. So yeah, the remake is definitely a different beast. I can't say it's flat out better than the original, but it has elements I like quite a bit. Barbara's character shift was cool, seeing her go from the scared girl to a legitimate badass. I like the nuance they add with Ben. He's trying to be the same rational man like in the original, but the stress of the situation gets to him, showing his anger more than once and really driving it home these people could not have worked together long term. Tom and Judy's death is a funny nod to the original, since everyone agrees Ben shooting the gas pump, that was goofy. They actually could have gotten themselves killed right there. And the reveal of the keys is a good way of closing out that plot thread, since the 60s movie just has the keys not work. Instead, the remake constantly draws attention to the keys. They try multiple ways to find them, and the plan falls apart because they couldn't get their hands on them. Then it's revealed they were right under their nose the whole time, hidden off in the basement where Cooper refused to let them go. The remake is definitely something to check out if you're a fan. Can't guarantee you'll love it, but it's genuinely good and respectful retelling. Plus, you get Tony Todd as Ben. That should be a selling point right there. And a short-haired tomboy zombie killer GF. Now, before we close this out, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the social commentary aspect of Night of the Living Dead. It's been widely accepted Night discussed things like racial segregation and discrimination, since Dwayne Jones, which you might not have guessed, is a black guy. In fact, he was the first black actor in a leading role for a horror film. Also, the film came out just a few months after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. A lot of people speculate that casting Dwayne Jones was an intentional move by Romero to comment on this incident and Jim Crow, especially since Romero himself was considered progressive for his time period. Some even interpret the ending where Ben dies as being reminiscent to a lynching, a small-town sheriff and his militia shooting this black guy and tossing him onto a burning fire. So is any of this true? No, actually, this is all bullshit. Romero didn't even know Martin Luther King died until he was trying to find a distributor for the movie. Dwayne Jones was cast in the role simply because Romero liked him as an actor. Romero was so progressive for his time, he didn't even consider Jones's race. He was legitimately colorblind and only cared that he was the best guy for the role. That's not to say it didn't cause controversy. You have race as this hot-button issue in America, specifically between whites and blacks, and you have this horror film where the black protagonist is shooting white people in the face. Now obviously, they're zombies. Zombies that also attacked other white people. But that didn't stop Jones from getting some serious heat for the role. Yeah, it was just the time. A role that, funny enough, was originally written for a white guy. The idea for Ben was that he would have been a hick trucker that just kind of stumbles into Barbara. Of course, Jones added his own spin, but the point remains that Ben's character had nothing to do with race. Romero didn't even rewrite the script for him to include the fact Ben was black. None of the characters comment on it, and it's not the source of tension in the group. Cooper doesn't hate Ben because he's black. He hates him because he sees a misguided idiot that gets people killed. The story's about human nature, of how all these things we thought mattered melt into nothing the minute the apocalypse kicks off. Because trust me, if Romero wanted to comment on racism, he'd include it. Rhodes in Day of the Dead was dropping some serious Game Awards towards Flyboy, because that was the point of Rhodes. If Romero wanted to include Ben's race as a factor, he would have done it. He simply didn't because the story's not about that. Hell, the remake doesn't even discuss it. Mainly because the story was pushed into 1989 instead of the 60s, so it would have been a stretch for it to really be believable. And once again, you'd be breaking characters down from scared people to needing a straw man to beat up on, which is not the point. The point is that Night of the Living Dead talks about deeper ideas than racial politics, instead focusing on general human behavior and how we break down in the face of a crisis, how our small dumb mistakes snowball and end up with dead bodies. Night of the Living Dead is a fantastic movie. Grim? Yes. Pleasant? Not particularly, but fantastic. It's something you need to watch at least once. I love the Romero trilogy to death. Far too many times was I caught watching these movies in computer class, but it was worth it. Watch this movie, watch Dawn and Day as well. It's a solid as hell trilogy, and they just get better and better with each one, which you'll soon see. Yep, we're covering all three. Next chapter is Dawn, which you'll see was Romero's bigger attempt at Night, an absolute icon in its own right. But that will be for later. I've already let this movie stretch far longer than intended, but hey, Night's a great movie, screw it. I'm rushing to get this out before the end of November, so we can have all of December to cover the rest of the trilogy. But who knows, it's hard to say. But you know what isn't hard to say? You already know. Gamer subs, use code TAL at checkout. Gamer subs, I haven't slept in 2 days. Gamer subs, code TAL gamer subs. I want to sleep again. Use code TAL gamer subs, code subs. Code subs. Yeah, that's all I have to say about Night of the Living Dead. It's a movie that speaks for itself. See you guys. Hey, loser, do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're going to be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's going to look at you funny. There's going to be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt. I will call the police, tell them how you're not buying my shirt. They're gonna plant crack in your house, and they're gonna arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.